born with this piece of self that speaks to self, but we're not good at hearing it. Sometimes the voice that's turned up is not the voice that we want to listen to. It's the voice connected to hurt and pain and trauma of our past. So getting better at turning down that voice and turning up the voice that's leading you.
Hi, Natasha. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for organizing this conversation.
I'm so excited about this. I loved your
Oh,
chapter. It
I'm
is
glad.
really important to listen to your voice. There was a story I really felt for you. You were 18 and your aunt passed away, and she was someone who was so close to you. You feel so connected to her. You look like her. You had to shift your focus from going to marine biology, which is where you thought you were going to go, and you went into psychology.
The memories from that are like a visceral core memory of
Yeah.
my being. And I'll never forget like the day of the funeral. So for those of you, going in and reading the book, I really start off my chapter with talking about why it's so important to use your voice and how much power your voice has. But I really talk about the moments, or one of the integral moments in my life where I lost my voice. So it was the day of my aunt's funeral. And I remember going to parts of the church service, but then leaving. Like the church was
Mhm.
packed, there was standing room only, like people were in the hallway and down the steps, and people were still coming in to the church. And I was leaving because I had to get to this exam.
Mhm.
And I remember being on the bus, the city bus, and just crying and getting to the exam and just crying. And it was like, I was like, why am I here? Even as I sat down and I picked up my pencil and I started, I'm like, why am I doing this? And I think I got my name written on the exam. That was it. And I
Oh,
just think I cried for like the whole 3 hours. And after that, I remember sitting at my locker, just like in a crumbled blob, really,
yeah.
at my locker and just crying and crying. And then I remember a few weeks later, my physics professor called me. I remember I was actually in the lobby going to the movies, about to buy the ticket, and I had a really good relationship with my professors, which is kind of weird, right? Because it was like, why didn't I just tell them? But my professor called me. I was like, "Hey, Natasha, really, you didn't pass the exam, you didn't pass the class. We won't be able to continue going into the science stream. What do you want to do?" And it was so interesting because in that moment, kind of simultaneously, it felt like, okay, my life is over, my dream is over, what I'm gonna do is over. But in one side, it was like, it's okay because I do have another plan of what
Mhm.
I love and all those. So yeah, so I made the decision to go into psychology. So now I have 3 degrees in psychology, but I did do a minor in biology, which was actually really, really helpful because I switched from learning about the animals and the ecosystem to really about like our brain chemistry.
Mm.
Right? So I still took all the biology course. It just shifted the focus,
Mm.
which was so helpful to have that background in biology to do the psychological work that I do, because I have a full understanding of not only what's happening with the mind, but also with the body at the same time. So
Wow.
yeah, so interesting.
And there's a moment where you said you realized that that change and that change in
Mm.
trajectory saved your life. Do you
Yes.
recall the moment where you made that connection?
Yeah, you know what? I made the connection years, years, years later. So I went through, I guess it was like college in Ontario because it would be called college, but in Quebec it's called CEGEP. So I went through my psychology profile in CEGEP, and then I did my um, undergrad in university with a specialization in cultural psychology and a minor in biology. And I think it was near the end of my undergrad where I was finishing up and where I was volunteering at different counseling centers and just having this moment of, yeah, I was supposed to do this. I was
Mm,
supposed to be here. I was supposed to do this, right?
mm,
Like, I know that other people have felt similar waves, but it's just such like an intense, like an all-encompassing, like, it's okay.
mhm,
This is what I was supposed to do. So I've had
mhm,
those moments at various times in my life. Um, Another one of those strong moments was after grad school too. And so I went on to do a master's in counseling psychology, with a clinical counseling focus where I did all my training in the hospital. So even after finishing my practicum education, I had that feeling too, like, yeah, this is what I was supposed to be doing. And then even years later, where those experiences come up and like, oh, that's why I had that. That's why that
mhm,
happened 5 years ago. I didn't know it then, but I know
mhm.
it now, right? So it's just interesting being able to look back at all of these various life experiences and how they've really truly shaped the who I am and the how I walk and the how I navigate and my lens of the world.
Wow. There was one point where you say that self-talk is normal
Mhm.
because I talk to myself a
Yes.
lot.
Yes,
And
as do I.
my husband, he's always like, Nasheen, you're having a fight in your head. You're a prosecutor, defense, the judge, the jury. You're sabotaging yourself. Half the time I was just creating all the problems and everything. And then I would end up, like you said in the book, a self-fulfilling prophecy where it would
Yes.
go, I think, negatively, but it was actually because of the way I perceived the
Mhm.
situation and it informed my actions. And then that's where I went. So when I read your chapter, I was wondering if you could give us some tips or some ways that we can catch that self-talk.
Yes, of course. So, self-talk is it's such an interesting process and it's so important. And the reason why I say it's an interesting process is because we all do it in some form, shape, right? We may not talk to ourselves out loud. It may be that inner voice. It may be this gut feeling, this intuition that happens. So we're all born with this piece of self that speaks to self, but we're not good at hearing it. Right? We're not good at hearing it. And also, based on our various life experiences, whether good or not so good, a lot of times those experiences shape what we hear. So it's kind of like, think of like a radio, right? Like where you're turning up the volume or turning it down. Sometimes the voice that's turned up is not the voice that we want to listen to. It's not the voice that has our best intentions in mind. Sometimes it's the voice connected to hurt and pain and trauma of our past. And that voice is turned up because we're so familiar to be listening to that voice. So, what we really want to get better at is starting to differentiate, is this a positive voice for me, for the who I am now, and for the who I want to be moving forward? Right? A lot of times we're listening to maybe a voice that came up in our earlier selves that was protective for that self at that time, but that could really be a hindrance to self now and the who you are moving forward. So we want to get better at lowering the volume on that negative and turning up the volume on that positive voice. I say to a lot of my therapy clients and coaching clients that, you know, that voice, that positive voice is there. We're just not used to listening to it. So it's kind of, think of it there like talking and doing all the things, but it's like on mute. So just like, just like talking, but no one
I
can
can have
hear
a
it.
visual, like
Yeah, yeah,
God
yeah.
over there, like yeah.
Yes, yes, exactly. Exactly. So we want to get better at turning up the volume and allowing that voice to come up and to be present. And it's a challenge, right? It
Oh yeah.
really involves understanding what voice is speaking to me. Is it actually my voice? Is it someone else's voice? Right? I
Mm,
know, like, even in your chapter, for example, right? You spoke about meeting another mom on the playground and
mm,
how her words stayed with you. Right. So it's like that voice of that mom, what worked for her and her experiences and her culture and what was the custom in her country stayed with you, but it didn't fit for who you
yeah.
are.
Yeah.
right? So it's recognizing then her voice merged into a figment of your voice, and you ended up turning it up really, really high,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So then getting really good at now, okay, being able to say, I understand that voice and how it was really important for that person
Mhm.
based on their experience and their customs and all of those stuff. But that's not, doesn't totally fit with me. Maybe there's some parts that I really like and I want to adopt, but there's some parts that I may not like. So getting better at turning down that voice and turning up the voice that is the voice that's leading you.
Wow, that is
Yeah.
so powerful, and I honestly I love that. I love the visual. So how can we help our children with that? I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old,
Mm.
and my son sometimes comes with me to me about situations that happen in his class when people saying things to him, and I'm trying to teach him to not let that get to him or change how he
Mhm.
feels about himself.
Yes, it's really hard. I have a 9-year-old and we're going through a lot of that right now at school with peer relationships and everything. And, we want to teach our children that peer relationships are important. We're such social beings that they're
Mhm.
important. However, we don't want them to lose who they are.
Yeah.
So a lot of the times use even with in my own household with my own son is getting him to understand and have some time of what does that feel like for you, right? I know you had just shared like you not wanting your kids to just focus on how they're feeling, but making space for those feelings,
Yeah.
making space to acknowledge. And what we do is that we have like a feeling chart at home on the fridge. We don't use it as much because I know my son now knows all like a lot of them by like kind of memory, but it's there if he ever gets lost and needs to go to it. So I always say, let's teach our children to pick 3 feelings that come up from a situation. And let's
Hmm.
talk about this. So say for example, it's like happy, sad, and angry. It's like, okay, tell me about the happy. What parts are happy? What parts are sad? What parts are angry? My son's really cute now. Now he does percentages. He's able to be
Oh,
like, it's 20% happy and 50%
I
angry.
love
And like
that.
he's able to do that. And it's
Yeah.
really funny like how he has grown with that now. But the more we make space for our children to talk about what they're feeling, how the situations have impacted them,
Mhm.
then they get used to speaking up and not hiding and shying away from sharing those emotions. Because a lot of times, right, we live in a world that doesn't focus a lot on emotions. It's kind of like emotions are weak, put them away and all that. But we want to have a more balanced reality for our children and for
Yeah.
us too, really, right? We
Yeah.
want to be able to teach our children, okay, what happened with that situation? Tell me about the happy, the sad, the angry. Why is the anger there? What's the anger trying to tell you? And a lot of times, anger as an emotion tells you, like, there was some unjust that happened. A boundary was violated, right? I know
Yeah.
you speak about boundaries in your chapter as well. So, like,
Yeah.
that boundary was violated. Um, what's the sadness? What's the sadness telling you? The sadness is telling you that maybe I feel isolated and alone from my friends. And the happy is telling you that, I stuck up for myself, but I still feel sad about it. And being able to have our children name what those feelings are, what's coming up, because that gives them voice. That's like the foundation of allowing them to use their voice, allowing them to speak out, and then going into, okay, what is it that you would have liked to seen from the situation instead? Right? Getting them to use their because our children are so, so intelligent. And sometimes we don't give them that chance to tap into, okay, what is it that you would like to see? Based on you feeling happy, angry, and sad, what is it that you would like to see? Okay, so how can we now work to think about how we can help that reality come forward? Or even if it's like, you know what, do you think that would actually work in the situation? And then getting them to like, okay, what can we try with this individual? While recognizing that the individual, the other child or the other peer will have their own feelings as well. Right? So it's really allowing them to understand what's the feeling, what's happening, giving them space to think about what an alternative solution could be and how do we work towards that. Because you know what? Our emotions are, they're alarm systems for our body,
Yeah.
right? We're not good at figuring out the alarms. We're good at recognizing when the doorbell rings, what that means. We're good at recognizing when the microwave rings, what that means. When the alarms on our phone or notification, we know what those mean. We're not good
Yeah.
at differentiating the emotional alarm systems within our body.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know about you, but for me, I found when I became a parent, it just, I had to
Oh,
relearn everything and it's
everything.
painful. Oh, wait, I'm not very good at managing my
Mm-hmm.
anger, or I'm not
Mm-hmm.
good at expressing my feelings. How am I
Yeah.
also going to expect him to,
Yes.
and my daughter as well, to do the same? So it
Yes.
actually
Yes.
makes you do a lot of work on yourself.
It does. And I think
Yeah.
that's one of the beautiful things and hard things equally of becoming a parent. It's figuring out that how do I do this?
Yeah.
What are
Oof.
the things that I had in my life, in my childhood that I want to replicate and that I don't want to replicate? And that gets to
Hmm.
be a really hard place, right? Where the things
Yeah.
that I may not want to replicate, those are the things that might be the most familiar to me, but I don't want to
Hmm.
replicate them. So how do I
Yeah.
make sure that I'm not replicating what is most familiar,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes what is most familiar is not what's good.
That's good. Yeah. Yep.
Mhm.
So when you work with your clients, what do you
Mhm.
find is the most common limiting belief that a lot of us have that holds us back?
Ooh, that's such a good one. I've been actually working on these with my coaching clients. The most pervasive and deeply rooted limiting the belief is that I am not enough.
Yep.
Right?
Ooh,
Oh my gosh.
that just
Yeah,
hit me
even
right
just like,
here. It's
oh,
so
yeah.
true. Yep.
It is. It
Ooh,
is.
yeah.
It is. So it's interesting because in my coaching program, we really spend time working on how those limiting beliefs are rooted,
Mm-hmm.
what has come up, right? Like how they're
Mm-hmm.
rooted, like a
Mm-hmm.
tree.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when we really think about those limiting beliefs, they come from various places in our lives. And what happens each time something has happened and we interpret it as I'm not enough, that root just solidifies down and anchors it.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are struggling to unlearn the I am not enough and how that is connected to so many pieces of how we live and how we navigate from our personal life to professional life and everything in between.
Hmm. How we treat others. There's so many things. It's just,
So many things. So many things. And I don't think we realize just how deep these roots have traveled and
hmm.
the impact that they continue to have on how we live and how we navigate the world. Even from conversations with loved ones or conversations in the workplace, a lot of them are really end up being the roots of how we navigate, how we speak up or how we don't speak up, what we share, what we don't share, how we feel like we're allowed to say something, giving ourselves
Hmm.
permission or taking away permission. Like
Yep.
they're really, really big.
I've been reading up on you. I've been looking into your Instagram and everything that you do. And you have a thriving practice. You're a leadership coach. You're an international speaker. How did you have time for this book and what inspired you to be a part of it?
Oh my gosh, that is such a good question. So I will be totally transparent. When I was reached out to do this book, I was like, I don't know, do I want to do this book? I actually have pieces of my own book starting, so I wasn't really
Oh.
sure what I wanted to do. So I did reach out to the publisher of the book and had a conversation. I'm like, what should I do? I'm thinking about doing my own. Should I be a part of this collab? And at one point the publisher was like, do both at the same time. And that just felt like I was putting another 100% on my plate, which I did not have. So
Yeah.
what I decided is like, you know what? I'm going to jump into doing a co-author book to get the flavor of what that would be like, how it is like working with the publisher that we work with, and then
Hmm.
make a decision if I wanted to jump in with that publisher to do another book or maybe shift my own something into something else, right? So that's
Yeah.
kind of how it started. And then I really went back and forth. Like my husband will tell you the number of conversations to like the deadline to say yes. I was like, should I do it? I'm not sure. Okay, I'm gonna say yes, but I'm not sure. And really, my husband's like, what is there to lose? Someone's asking you to write a chapter in a book. Like, why would you not say yes? So I was like, okay, that's a good point. So let me say yes and then figure things out. So that's kind
Wow.
of how that started. And yeah, and then just jumped in. And then, it was really hard to solidify what my chapter was going to be like. I had a lot of difficulty getting it started. What was I going to do? So I actually reached out to my own therapist. I'm like, listen, some things are coming up as I'm going to write this chapter. And I had nothing. I had nothing written yet. So I had a really great conversation with my own therapist. And, contrary to popular belief that therapists have therapists, therapists need therapists, right? And I really appreciate being able to have that someone who can go just as deep as myself and figure out all the internal stuff that was coming
Mhm.
up. And yeah, and then working through that was very necessary. And then once I did that, it was just like,
It
and
just
I
came
had,
out.
yeah, it just came out exactly. And I had to cut a lot back. I had
Mm.
to cut a lot back, which kind of goes into, okay, I'm going to save all those pieces for my own
Mhm.
book, right? So yeah, that's how things started.
Yeah, and I'm curious now. So you just said into my own book. So you are going ahead with your own book as well?
That's the
Because
plan. I don't have any solidified dates or publisher, but yeah, definitely that is going to be the plan maybe for 2026.
ooh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
So,
I want to read. And when you were putting the chapter together,
Mm.
is there anything surprising that you learned about yourself?
So, you know what? What is really surprising is the now piece. The now piece that it is written and I'm talking about it. I was on a podcast that came out last week.
Hmm.
And I was talking and sharing just how we are today, a little bit of the book and things that come out. And literally right there in that podcast, I literally stopped and was like, huh, I need to unpack that. Because it was just like, as I was just sharing, it came up and it made me think and reflect like right there in that moment. So
Hmm.
yeah, things are coming up now that it's done. I think it's the, when you're in it and you're doing it, but now that it's done and it's its own life, and I could step away and look, I'm like, oh, I didn't recognize that. I need to go back and check that out. I'm always still doing my own work just to get to a deeper place, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, we
All
tend
of
to
us
do
are a
that.
work in progress, I
All
guess,
of
right?
us.
Like
Yes.
no one's ever totally there.
No.
It's life,
No.
right? There's ups and
It's
downs
life.
and
Yeah.
all of that.
As long as we are living and breathing, there is going to be work to do. Yeah.
Yeah. What is your favorite empowering snack?
Oh my gosh, I'm such a popcorn girl. I love
Oh, ooh.
popcorn. I love popcorn. Whether it's like kettle corn is great, something with a mix of sweet and salty. Yeah,
Mm.
big popcorn person. You know what I found recently? Have you heard of popcorners?
No.
They're okay. It's like a popcorn chip. It's so cool.
Oh.
It's actually really, really cool. It's like a
Mm.
chip, like a triangle chip.
Okay.
Um, I guess it's made with corn because it tastes like popcorn. But then they have different flavors. So yesterday I tried the salt and vinegar one. I was like, oh, this is really good. A bit really salty, but I was like, oh, I'm enjoying this new like flavor spin on popcorn. So yeah,
Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna
so
try
yes,
that.
try popcorners.
Okay, I will do.